Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr and also with Kevin Noon for our live college football playoff rankings reveal show. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm pretty good, but Penn State didn't give me 10 years and $3.8 trillion to lose 4 games a year. So I'm not as good as other people are, but I'm doing pretty well.
Kevin, would you want to live in Happy Valley for 10 years?
I could commute with the type of money that Franklin's getting, but sign me up to the Mel Tucker deal. I'll take that one too. Not that I want to live in East Lansing, but there's some very nice suburbs. I've stayed out in Jackson and some places like that before. But yeah, why didn't we get into coaching, guys?
It's a good question. I ask myself that a lot when I see some of the dumb decisions that coaches make. And me being a person who only makes good choices, I was like, gosh, imagine what I could be doing on the sidelines instead of what those guys are doing. But it is what it is. We're here. Might as well do the show now, I guess. Um, Tom, your confidence level that Ohio State will be ranked over Alabama tonight.
I think it's probably about a 6.5 out of 10, something like that. I think my confidence that they should be ranked over Alabama right now is about a 9.5 out of 10. And I think they probably will be. But I thought they were going to jump Oregon last week because that seemed pretty screamingly obvious to me as well, and it didn't happen. So I'm not totally sold on. And frankly, there's an argument to be made that Ohio State's better off just staying 3 because functionally it doesn't matter because they're going to jump Alabama if Alabama loses and Ohio State wins out anyway, and that way you don't have Nick Saban having one little extra bit of psychology to play with his team. So because I think Ohio State's best served if Alabama is not in the playoff. It's just that limits the number of teams that could, have a coin toss-ish chance of beating Ohio State to just Georgia at that point if Alabama's out.
Kevin, I just saw Tyrone Willingham smirking. What kind of confidence level can you have in this committee with Tyrone Willingham on it?
Well, he got a lot of money in coaching, so I mean, he's crafty like a fox, if that makes sense. But yeah, I've not even bothered to look at who's on the committee other than Gary Barta, to be honest, because when you put names to it, then it's a lot easier to pop off and tag somebody and end up on one of those no-fly lists. So I'm not going to do that.
Wow. Oh, here we are with the rankings already.
All right, 25.
Clemson. Go ahead, Tom.
25 Arkansas. Okay. Remember our theory. You look at the bottom of the rankings to see what the committee wants to do at the top. 25 Arkansas tells me they still want to prop Alabama up. So go back and find my tweet from a few days ago where I said, now, if you're thinking like a college football playoff committee member, they're going to keep Arkansas in the bottom of the rankings because it was a close enough win that they don't drop too much. So now they prop Alabama's resume up. So there you go. 24 Houston, 23 Clemson, 22 UTSA, 21 San Diego State. Clemson in the college football rankings behind 2 mid-majors, just as we all would have expected back in the summer.
So Arkansas 2 weeks ago, they were 25, moved up to 21 with a win over who knows, and then down to 25 with the loss to Alabama, back to their customary spot, keeping they're like the bowling railings in the gutters for Alabama so that they can't have a gutter ball this season. They're just going to keep them right there at 25 so that thou shalt not pass below that. As we wait for the 20 through 16, there we go, Tom.
Here we go. 20 North Carolina State, 19 Utah, up 4 spots after absolutely bludgeoning Oregon. 18 Wake Forest drops 8 spots after their second straight loss, I believe. 17 Pittsburgh, 16 Iowa. 16 Iowa is, there is some good news in here because Iowa being 16, we have not seen Wisconsin yet. So whoever Ohio State plays in the Big Ten championship game is going to be a ranked team and quite possibly going to be a ranked team high enough that they will still be a ranked team if and when they lose to Ohio State. So that's some potential good news there.
Wisconsin was 15 last week.
Yeah, Wisconsin 15 last week. So you still have, even if but
And Michigan State too.
They're comfortably in there. Both Iowa and Wisconsin comfortably in there. Where assuming they win this week and you don't have both of them lose, whoever Ohio State beats in the Big Ten championship game is going to be another ranked win. Which, if Ohio State wins out, they're in. It's just a matter of seeding. But the higher you are, the less chance you probably have to play Alabama. So that's not a bad thing. Or Georgia.
And we're assuming Michigan State is not dropped out of the top 25, so they should be coming up here in this next group.
Michigan State should be still. And again, Michigan State being in here means even if they lose to Penn State this week, they're probably not dropping all the way out of the rankings. That will remain a ranked win for Ohio State as well. Yeah, good point.
I'm still here. I'm just.
Yeah,
I'm in Photoshop. I'm just waiting.
I'm trying to come up with something interesting about the ACC teams in here. There's 4 of them from 17 to 23 or so, and
it's the power of the alliance. It's the power of the alliance.
It's just okay. Here we go. So 15 Texas A&M up 1, 14 Wisconsin up 1, 13 BYU up 1. Michigan State only falls 5 spots to number 12. I mean, to get beaten like they did, Oregon. This is intriguing to me. Oregon drops 8 spots for losing 38-7 to a ranked team. Michigan State only drops 5 despite losing, basically 1 trillion to 7 to Ohio State. Because, I mean, the Oregon game was kind of a slow strangulation. The Ohio State game was Michigan State got an A-bomb dropped on their heads. And so those are 2 very different ways to lose. That's a decent amount of respect for Ohio State for Michigan State to only drop 5 spots and Oregon to drop all the way down to 11.
Yeah, because we know the committee was talking about Oregon, Ohio State, and Alabama all in a group last week. Mm-hmm. Oregon is now out of that group, so I'm going to assume there's obviously a bunch of talk about Alabama and Ohio State, as there should be. And Michigan State falling 5 spots is kind of reminiscent of what happens when an SEC team loses to Alabama, where you don't want to drop them too much because you want that win to be good and stay good. And certainly that's what's happened with the Michigan State. So that's good for the Buckeyes right there, even though obviously, yes, win and you're in. Yes, it's Michigan week. None of this matters. We know. All right, beat Michigan. That's all, that's understood. That's implied.
Why are you guys even having this show?
Yes, exactly.
Because you're watching it. I went back and found my tweet from Saturday night. Everyone's saying the committee that will drop Alabama behind Ohio State isn't thinking like the CFP committee. This is close enough that Arkansas might stay in the top 25, bolstering Alabama's resume with another ranked win. I mean, I look at that. I said 6.5 out of 10 at the start. My confidence that Ohio State is ahead of Alabama. I might be down to a 6 now.
Yeah.
You can just see what they're doing. Number 10, Oklahoma, up 3 spots. I don't know if that's enough. I mean, well, you're gonna have enough teams.
You're gonna have Ole Miss coming up here too.
Yeah. Oh man,
and Ole Miss should be like 9, but they might be higher.
Well, and Ole Miss is, Ole Miss is not going to be able. Yeah, Ole Miss is 9th. They're not going to be able to win. Oklahoma, their Ole Miss is only going to have 1 game left. That's going to be a unranked win over Mississippi State if they get it. Oklahoma would potentially have 2 ranked wins ahead, so they would jump Ole Miss. Even with Ole Miss ahead of them right now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. If Oklahoma wins 2, I think Oklahoma jumps Ole Miss ultimately anyway.
And this should be Notre Dame or Oklahoma State. If it's Oklahoma State, that means Notre Dame has remained ahead of them.
Well, and Notre Dame was dominant in their win over Georgia Tech, and it is just Georgia Tech, but they won by a good.
Here's Baylor.
Now 8 is
yes, Baylor went from 11. Yeah, that's right. Baylor,
okay, yeah. Baylor, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma all up 3 spots.
And now you'll have either Oklahoma State or Notre Dame, probably Oklahoma State based on what it was last week.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, Notre Dame is ahead of Michigan in both of the coaches and AP polls, but seems, very likely will be behind them in the playoff rankings again this week. I don't know what to make of that, if other than the playoff committee might be taking into account that, that they don't want to see Notre Dame again. This has to be Oklahoma State at 7, right?
I mean, unless it's Notre Dame and they're just like, let's just do it now. Oklahoma State got to start giving them credit for their defense,
Mm-hmm.
playing in a conference, looking dominant. There you go, Oklahoma
Oklahoma
State.
State, Oklahoma State 7. But again, the Oklahoma State Notre Dame conversation is the same conversation we just had about Oklahoma Ole Miss. Ole Miss is only going to play one more game. Notre Dame is only going to play one more game. They play Stanford this week, which is a garbage team this year. So you're not going to be able to materially improve your resume. Oklahoma State or Baylor or Oklahoma, I think potentially any of them with 2 ranked wins, closing. I don't remember who Baylor has this week. Baylor might not have a ranked team this week, but you're going to pick up a ranked win. You're going to pick up that conference champion bonus. I think it is entirely possible. At least Oklahoma State and Baylor jump over Notre Dame if they win the championship. If they both win out, either of them, or Oklahoma's got a long climb to get over Notre Dame. But if you beat Oklahoma State and Baylor back-to-back weeks, that's potentially pretty impressive.
Baylor has Texas Tech at home this week as their final game. And again, should they lose that, then you're probably going to see Bedlam twice, depending on what happens. So now the question is, does Notre Dame jump Michigan? Does Michigan jump Cincinnati? Do we see any of those things happening? Kevin, I know you're typing. Would you care to chime in? We don't want to leave you out.
This committee has not done a lot to give me a ton of faith in anything at any step. So, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see, no matter how great Cincinnati's win was over SMU, to see them, they're a group of 5. They get what they get. The door is open if some fallout happens, but does it really matter where they are at this point? If they're at 6 and fallout happens, they still could slide up to 4. So it wouldn't surprise me to see anything at this point. But I'll bring back up the rankings as UGA has just been announced.
Yeah, Georgia, a unsurprising number 1. Yeah, we're about to have the big dramatic reveal of number 2. I don't know that this matters that much because Ohio State. There you go. So Ohio State now number 2.
I'm a little bit surprised. That is correct, but yes. I'm surprised they got it correct.
Yeah, which means number
Gary
3.
Barta, a genius.
That was Georgia. Alabama looked somewhat unimpressive against a lower ranked team at home. Ohio State just completely disemboweled a top 10 team. That is the most dominant win against a top 10 team I think you're going to see at any point. And so, yeah, it's not a huge surprise. I had it as better than 50-50, but again, Arkansas staying in the top 25 tells you they want Alabama to stay in the top 20 and, as high as they can. So that's, that is the committee tipping their hand a little bit about, there's Alabama 3, unsurprising. I think I'm going to go Cincinnati 4, Michigan 5, Notre Dame 6, because all 3 of them had big wins on Saturday. Mm-hmm. Cincinnati had the best opponent of all 3 of them, followed probably by Michigan and then Notre Dame. So I don't think I saw enough to jump Notre Dame over Michigan. So I'll say 4 Cincinnati, 5 Michigan, 6 Notre Dame. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, that's exactly where I am. No reason to change anything right now. They can jump Michigan to number 2 with a win next week if they want. Or to 3, you move Alabama up or whatever, and Michigan's right in there. So I don't think there's any need to anger Cincinnati just yet because they can still stay in this thing, no matter what happens next week.
Right. Well, and dropping Cincinnati right now, either Ohio State or Michigan is going to lose next week. So that's how this works. So, and Cincinnati has 2 tough games left. That road trip to ECU this weekend is no joke. That is Friday in Greenville. That is not an easy team to beat. The record is not fantastic. Cincinnati is number 4, as expected. East Carolina's net record this year is not super impressive. It is a pretty decent team. I think that's a sneaky trap game for Cincinnati. And then they're going to have to play Houston in the AAC championship game. That's going to be a challenge as well. So I think Cincinnati is probably winning you're in at this point because I don't know that they're going to, Georgia and Alabama both, Georgia and Alabama, one of them is going to have another loss. Ohio State,
Notre
and Michigan,
Dame's not getting in.
Ohio State and Michigan, one of them is going to have another loss. Notre Dame can't material. Cincinnati is 2 spots ahead of Notre Dame right now and has 2 games better than anything Notre Dame has left. So as long as Cincinnati wins, there's no real argument to move Notre Dame above them. Yeah, Michigan 5, Notre Dame 6. So yeah, and I think you've got maybe a Big 12 team sneaks in there, especially if it's
Right.
Oklahoma State and they don't have to jump very far. But the only way you could possibly see Cincinnati dropping out even if they win out is Alabama beats Georgia, so you get 2 SEC teams in, plus whatever Big 10 team comes out, Ohio State or Michigan, plus the Oklahoma State wins 2 dominating games the next 2 weeks, and Cincinnati just looks against their teams. That's a possibility, but yeah, Texas or Busted says that's setting up an Ohio State versus Cincinnati matchup of Ohio State, Cincy, and Georgia win out. I think that's right. I mean, I think it's Ohio State, Cincinnati 2-3, Georgia, Oklahoma State. Georgia, Oklahoma State 1-4. I call that the Orange Bowl presented by betting the under. That game is going to be gross. That game is going to be gross if it's Ohio State or if it's Georgia, Oklahoma State.
Super chat from Ryan Dawes. Thank you for that, Ryan. Kevin, go ahead and give us some thoughts. You've been typing away.
I have been. And I can get past a lot of the comments in the chat that were just as we were going along. Unfortunately, I can't do both at the same time. Yeah, I really thought that there was a good chance that Ohio State was going to be 2, but then again, I don't trust the committee because they've not given me reason to trust them in the past. But that sets up a top 5 matchup between Ohio State and Michigan, 2 versus 5. Fox is updating the promo as we speak, so that's exciting. Cincinnati being in the top 4. I mean, I agree with what Tom said about ECU. This is not one of ECU's better teams, but they can play a little bit of a spoiler. I watch ECU because a good friend of mine, his wife, who's a friend as well, she's an ECU alum, so we've gone over to their house to watch ECU. So that's life in the big city right there. I'm really looking forward to Bedlam, and I really kind of want to see what comes out of that. I want to see what Oklahoma State is able to do against an Oklahoma team that, okay, they turned it around against Iowa State, yet they weren't really impressive there. So, I think we could see a lot of moving parts. And then again, to touch on something a couple pages ago, Wisconsin being 14, I think is very good news, because as we sit there and we notice that Arkansas was 25 and they just don't want to drop that out of there. And I don't know who Arkansas closes the season against, but
Mizzou at home. They have Mizzou at home.
That's what I say about that one. But then again, Eli Drinkowitz has got himself a little bit of piss and vinegar going on after the whole thing with Dan Mullen, and may the force be with you. But that game, I'm probably not going to DVR. But I think they did a pretty decent job. I'll be interested to hear what Barta says about why this week. I mean, obviously, I'll give you 56 reasons why, but I'm not disgusted by these rankings.
I know, and that's unfortunate. There's very little drama with these rankings. Like, all of the answers could just be cut and dry this week.
And one of the things that I think, as I said earlier, I don't think it's a huge deal that Ohio State jumps Alabama. I think I'm going to modify my answer on that slightly, because here's the scenario where I do think that matters. If Alabama goes into the championship week 2 and Ohio State's 3, and Alabama loses 21-20 to Georgia, the committee could very easily just slide them down 1 spot, 2-3, and then Ohio State has to deal with Alabama in the semifinal game. Now, Ohio State 2, Alabama 3, assuming Ohio State handles its business, if Alabama loses either of their next 2 games, they can't keep them at 3. I mean, I say that they can't, and of course the committee can do whatever. They can move them up. They can move them to number 1. I mean, roll tide, sure, why not? But it would be very hard to justify keeping them at 3. So then you're bumping them to 4, and then you're setting up a Georgia-Alabama rematch the next week. I mean, again, and maybe that's fine if they want to do that. It would probably be a pretty competitive game. and whoever wins that game is going to come out beat to all snot. And, Ohio State, if Ohio State's playing, say, Cincinnati or something in the 2-3 game, that's not as physical a game as Georgia, Alabama. So either Alabama is someone else's problem at that point, if you're Ohio State, or Alabama's out of it entirely and Alabama's not anyone's problem. Either of those are good results for Ohio State. And frankly, Ohio State would love to see Georgia and Alabama have to play again. But
Oh yeah.
I think most likely at that point, Alabama moving from 2 to 3, I think that means that significantly increases the likelihood that Alabama would be out with a close loss in the SEC title game at that point.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk this week. I've seen talking heads say no way Alabama gets in with 2 losses, and we've been talking on this show like don't just think that that's not going to happen, because it very well could be. I feel better about that not happening now after seeing these rankings than I did beforehand, because like you said, Tom, how far there's only so much further they can drop now, and they don't want to do a rematch, I don't think.
Mhm.
And other teams are going to win their way in now. Like, assuming Oklahoma State wins their way in, you can't keep Alabama ahead of Oklahoma State and Notre Dame, whatever. But like, there are going to be teams that are putting together all of the checkpoints and the check marks and the conference championships that Alabama won't have, and then they'll also have the additional loss where now there are enough suitors, basically, where the CFP doesn't have to be like, oh, 2 a.m. Okay, we'll just come on, Alabama, let's go. There's enough other options there, and so I'm feeling better about Alabama not being in with a loss, because I just don't see. There's no point in having a semifinal, Kevin, of Alabama and Georgia.
Yet I don't want to sit there and say specifically, but I will. I did read a bowl projections this morning. It may have been Sporting News that did have the rematch in the semifinals in the orange, and I was a little surprised by that. But then again, I think that maybe that was, sometimes we see the bowl projections that are done with, well, this is just what we think that the rankings are going to be, and we're just going to throw things in, and if stuff gets sorted out. But I don't know. It's a situation where if you're the one, shouldn't you get some sort of reward more than just geographical preference of being the one, and not getting the the slide off of the SEC just to prevent that matchup from happening? It seems a little hinky to me to sit there and say, well, we're already going to do some weirdness in terms of the 2 SEC teams in order to break that up. But great season, good job, y'all. Here you go. But you get to play them in Dallas, so that's fine, right?
I mean, if you're Georgia, I mean, at that point, Alabama, if you look at Alabama's resume right now, they have a ranked win over Ole Miss, which is what, 12th, 11th, 8th? Where's Ole Miss this week? 9th?
They
It was a number.
are 9.
It was a number.
9.
9. Okay. So they have a very impressive 3-touchdown win over Ole Miss, number 9 Ole Miss, and they squeaked by number 25 Arkansas last week. Those are their ranked wins in the mighty SEC West. The other wins are unranked Miami, unranked Florida, unranked. They lost to Texas A&M, unranked Mississippi State, unranked Tennessee, unranked LSU. And they're going to play unranked Auburn this week. So they have 1 and then 2 with an asterisk ranked wins, because the committee kept Arkansas in at the back end because we told you this is what they were going to do. And so at that point, Oklahoma State's going to have a better resume in terms of more ranked wins than, and probably quite possibly a higher ranked win, or, at least comparable wins to what Alabama's best win is going to be. And they're going to have, the second best win and potentially the third best win at that point. If Oklahoma State wins and beats Oklahoma twice more, or, if Baylor wins and beats, Baylor's already beaten Oklahoma, and if Baylor then wins the Big 12 championship against, either Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, whoever wins Bedlam, plus you get the conference championship bonus, which is supposed to be somebody that plays in your favor. You'd have that over Alabama. I don't think there's an argument to be made other than, well, but we all know that Alabama is better than Oklahoma State, like other, which is not part of the committee's,
Aside from watching
that
the
is not in the,
games,
that
Yes.
is not the committee's bylaws. Like, yeah, I am deeply sorry. Guess what? I think Clemson's probably better than Oklahoma State. Real sorry about all your losses, but that's how it works. And Alabama, who always lives on, oh well, look at all these fantastic teams we have to play in the SEC West every year. It's like, well, most of that division's kind of crap this year. So how much credit are they supposed to get for it?
Yeah, and that keeping Arkansas at 25 also gives Ole Miss 2 ranked wins this season, with the other being number 15 Texas A&M. So you kill 2 birds with 1 stone by leaving Arkansas in the rankings. Super chat from Treasure the Torah. Thank you for that. What's up, Tom, Kevin, and Steve? Party on, fellas.
Finish
Wayne's
reading,
World.
Steve.
I mean, no longer is he Bony Tony. He's, I don't know.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And for the 300 of you watching right now, if you want to go ahead and hit the like on your screen right there, we would appreciate that as well. Richard Hacker, discuss if Georgia loses to Alabama. That is what is left to discuss, because Georgia's best win at that point, what Kentucky, who is their best win at this point? It's no longer, is it Auburn? I mean, do they have a ranked win?
Clemson is now a ranked win once again.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, Arkansas is a ranked. Arkansas is like the glue holding every SEC team's resume together, because
Isn't it funny?
They are the second. Arkansas is the second ranked win for 3 SEC teams this week: Georgia,
It's
Ole Miss.
amazing.
So we're rooting for Mizzou, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, not that they would necessarily drop, but that's again, when we tell you, look at the bottom of the rankings to see what they want to do at the top.
Man.
This is what we're talking about. So you look at, an Alabama win over Georgia is probably the worst case scenario for Ohio State, because at that point, Ohio State is, Alabama, I'm sure, would jump Ohio State to be number 1, because then they'd have the win over this number 1 team. So of course you can't deny that. So of course they're number 1. Ohio State's number 2. They have an out to not give you a rematch in the semifinals. So they're going to move Georgia to 3 at that point. And then 4 is whichever of the Cincinnati, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State parade of patsies that they want to feed to Alabama. So that is unquestionably the worst case scenario for Ohio State. Like, Ohio State being 2 right now sets up, as long as they win out, they're in pretty good shape. And they probably have a favorable semifinal matchup, unless Alabama beats Georgia, in which case, congratulations, you're going to have to beat both of them to win the national championship.
Yeah. Super chat from Treebuck. How many of this weekend's games would effectively be round of 16 matchups and expanded playoff, if you get what I mean? LOL. I mean, you look at Ohio State, Michigan, they're playing for a division. So, I mean, that would be Alabama, Auburn, not so much. Oklahoma State-ish. There's no Clemson, certainly not. So I don't know. There's a couple.
Yeah, they're not a lot of those matchups that you say, okay, that would absolutely be a feeder into the next round outside of, Ohio State, Michigan, and truthfully, Ohio State, Michigan probably shouldn't be a round of 16 game just based on what it is. But yeah, it's an interesting concept to think about. But there're just some teams that aren't holding up their end of the bargain right now.
Well, the other side of that is if you're getting auto bids to conference champions, then anyone who could potentially be a conference champion who still is alive for the conference championship, any of those then would kind of be feeder games. So that is Wake Forest playing. Who's Wake Forest play? I don't remember who Wake Forest plays this weekend. NC State, North Carolina, UNC is a game. If Wake Forest loses, then NC State, if they beat North Carolina, then they would win the division. If both of those teams lose, Clemson would be in.
Wake's at BC.
Wake up BC, and then Clemson plays South Carolina this weekend. So that's not a conference game, but they would potentially be the third team if both of the other teams lose. Pitt's already in, so that one wouldn't matter. But the Baylor game potentially could be important. That could determine a Big 12 championship spot. Oklahoma State, that would determine a championship spot. Ohio State, Michigan. I mean, Ohio State, Michigan, honestly, might be less significant in that case because whoever loses that game might still make it as an at-large, especially if it's an Ohio State team. Ohio State,
Oregon State.
Yes, Oregon. I think I forget the tiebreakers in the Pac-12 North, but it's like there are still like 4 teams.
Wazoo still has a shot based on how
Yeah,
things are.
Yeah. Wazoo is still potentially in the running in the North.
It's just 3 teams are alive. It's Oregon has a lead on Washington State and Oregon State, and that's it. So I don't know what the situation is with Oregon State and Washington if say Oregon State beats Oregon, but just another one to keep an eye on.
Stephen Piper with a super chat. Please share your thoughts on Franklin's extension. What does this mean for Ohio State and Ryan Day moving forward? Thanks for the super chat, Stephen. Everybody was ready to push him off to LSU or to USC, but now, I mean, the good news for Franklin and Penn State is he has some years behind him in terms of being able to recruit and say, I'm going to be there. Obviously, that's very good for Drew Allar if he wants to go to Penn State, which he does. So that means something there. But I think what Steven and others want to hear is, well, now Penn State's locked into James Franklin, 8-4 James Franklin, 9-3 James Franklin, who, we're good, but we can't be elite. Ohio State's elite. Well, that remains true at this point. So, it certainly gives Ohio State a lot of latitude in terms of where it's going to be able to recruit because it keeps Penn State from going out and maybe making the right hire. Maybe, and I'm not, that's all right. Sorry. Calm down, Nittany Lion fans, all one of you that's probably watching us right now. But at this point, the truth is that Penn State didn't come in and into the Big Ten the way that it thought it was from being an independent and thinking that it was going to push everybody around and it was going to win 2 out of every 3, Big Ten championship. That's not been the case for them. So, I think Ohio State is perfectly fine seeing James Franklin maintaining his role as the head coach at Penn State.
It also means Ryan Day is about to get paid. And with that, I'll go ahead and leave it for you guys. I'm going to go jump on the teleconference.
All right, we'll talk to you. And Treasure's sorry that he messed up the name as well with his super chat contribution. Thank you, Treasure.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna drop Tony out of here, and there we go. So
boom,
that's an old message.
So here's I think some context on the James Franklin thing. Yes, it's 10 years. Yes, that's however many millions of dollars. It looks like, oh man, he's locked in there. His buyout rises from $4 million to $12 million through April 1st, 2022. So basically, this is it's more expensive to hire James Franklin this offseason. That's what that contract did. Buyout drops to $8 million through December 31st, 2022, then $6 million after that, $2 million 2024 to 2025. This is basically a 3-year contract. After that, it's almost free to buy him out. The buyout is the tell on how long the contract actually is. The top line numbers are just kind of almost a distraction.
Yeah, and you see, you've looked at the deal. I hadn't had a chance to look at the deal, and the buyout numbers are very important to kind of see what it means because you can put all the years you want to on a contract, but if the buyout is nothing or next to nothing, is it really worth anything at that point? And we're not seeing many coaches these days get to the termination point of a contract. They don't fulfill all the years on it. So PJ Fleck signed his deal. I mean, Mel Tucker, I'll be interested when I see the pieces of that deal of what the buyouts are there. I mean, obviously that was to keep LSU away. There was a story in The Athletic where I think it was Dave Aranda, Billy Napier, and drawing a blank on the third coach, but none of them were Lincoln Riley, which everybody wanted to believe. Yeah. We're very much in the silly season, so it'll be interesting to see what the fallout is.
Well, and the other context that's important to understand around LSU is they've got a pending Title IX investigation going on there, and that is a real dark cloud. It's almost like having a pending NCAA sanctions and trying to hire a coach, and it's like, well, what is this going to do? What is this going to do to our ability to run a functional program for the foreseeable future? If you are a Lincoln Riley, you're in a perfectly good situation. You don't need to assume the risk at LSU that something significant could come out and completely blow up the administration, completely blow up the status or the security of that job. There's no reason to involve yourself there. So that's when you are looking at, if you're Billy Napier, yes, that still is a significant jump up from Louisiana Lafayette up to LSU. So that's why you're looking at more like that type of job. Dave Aranda maybe going from Baylor to LSU. That would be a pretty significant jump in pay probably. So that's why you're in that class of coaches now. James Franklin got hired Jimmy Sexton as his agent, and Jimmy Sexton did exactly what Jimmy Sexton does. Every time Nick Saban wants to buy a new house, Jimmy Sexton floats that Texas is interested in him, and then all of a sudden, boom, the Bama Board of Trustees buys Nick Saban a new house.
Absolutely. And Jimmy Sexton gets 3%.
That is how Jimmy Sexton works. That is how Jimmy Sexton has always worked. Jimmy Sexton worked his magic. Congratulations to James Franklin on his new contract.
A contributor to the Hue with the super chat. Will an OSU quarterback transfer after this year? You can't unring a bell, and I don't like to associate kids' names to transferring. That's just a long-standing policy for me, because the second you say, well, I think this kid's out of here, suddenly he becomes a terrible kid who's made horrible life decisions, and now we don't like him anymore. So I'm not going to do that. I mean, that's not me ducking the question. I think it's very unlikely that Ohio State opens up fall camp 2022 with all 4 quarterbacks. I just don't see that happening. I think we all have ideas of, this guy might go or that guy might go, but I'm just not going to attach something to it, because it's not fair to the kid. It's just somebody's son, and it's just not right to sit there and put that kind of evil on them if they stay. And it's like, you can't unsay it.
Exactly. And that's what our editorial policy has been, Tony and I as well. I'm right there with you. I don't think there will be 4 of these guys on the roster at the start of the 2022 season. But yeah, we have generally made a policy not to speculate on pending or possible transfers until the person, the only exception we made was Joe Burrow, when Joe Burrow was basically actively talking about the fact that, he was thinking about it. So at that point it was like, okay, well, if he's willing to talk about it, we're willing to talk about it. But other than that, we have generally had a policy not to, for that exact reason.
Rick Reese with the super chat. Thank you, Rick. What are the chances Kerry Combe is back next year? I think we haven't seen a perfect defense. Against Michigan State, things went really well, but let's remember they were without Jalen Naylor. Ohio State got up on them so quickly that Kenneth Walker really wasn't an issue. Jaden Reed was not in the game for long. I saw a point on the sidelines where it looked like he might have been dinged up. I don't know if he was pulled straight up because he was hurt, or if he just wasn't feeling great, or again, it was why are we going to put gas in this car that's up on blocks at this point? Because that's what Michigan State's offense was. It was on blocks, on cinder blocks. So, with that being said, Kerry Combs is an assassin on the recruiting trail. And, I think that there's still a path with him as a member of the staff of where he's still, he can still keep the DC title. Ohio State likes throwing titles around because it allows them to pay guys more based on what the pooling is, but it's a lot easier when somebody has a title to be able to do that. I don't think that it's going to be a matter of, if they do this, they won't be able to do that. So, I don't know if I want to put a percentage on it, but I think it's a pretty strong chance that that Combs is back next year. Especially as he's getting toward the end of his coaching career, probably. And I'm not trying to start any controversy by saying that. He's got the gray hair. He's an older fella, so he's not going to coach forever. So, I don't know if he wants to go somewhere and start over again. And every indication I've gotten from the program is they would really like to keep him, but I think it was all contingent upon things kind of getting fixed, which they've largely been.
Yeah, it has largely been fixed. It's been more or less straightened out now. It's not perfect. This is not the 2019 defense, but they're doing pretty well. If they give up 63 points to Michigan this week, that might change the conversation a little bit. If they win the national championship and do it by playing some pretty good defense in a couple of the games, well, that probably changes the conversation in the other direction. So, but as of right now, I think all you have to do is look at, you remember the game when Ryan Day gave Kerry Combs the game ball after the game? That was Ryan Day basically telling Kerry Combs, we still love you. We still want you around. Kerry Combs is a fantastic recruiter. Kerry Combs has dramatically rebuilt the Ohio State secondary in the time that he's been at Ohio State. That was, the cornerback room is kind of a mess after Taver Johnson left. Really, really shorthanded. That has completely been rebuilt. They have pretty good depth there and are continuing to bring in really good talent every year. So yeah, they would love to keep Kerry Combs. If it was up to Ryan Day, I think Ryan Day would keep Kerry Combs. And, I mean, Kerry Combs is old enough that he has a son who has coached in the NFL. Like that means you're not 30 at that point. So, if you have a son who has coached in the NFL, that means you are at the point of your career where you're not getting pushed out the door, but also you're not on the way up. This is not a meteoric rise that is ahead. So, would Kerry Combs? I have not seen Kerry Combs' name attached to like the Akron job or something. I was wondering if would he really want to do a head coaching position in Ohio? Maybe, but I think he's pretty happy at Ohio State. I think, and they can pay him and he can keep the title. I saw someone in the comments say make Barnes the co-DC, and that would probably be what they would do, I would assume. And then if they're happy with how things are going right now, you just kind of keep it status quo, give Barnes a co-DC title, give him a little pay bump, and on you go to next year.
Right. Steve Gerdeman with the comment here saying, do you think Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith are being overlooked by the talking heads who are only really talking about Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo? That might be something to watch, don't you think?
Super chat us, cheapskate. Yeah, that's I think that there's a decent possibility that the Ohio State pass rush makes a significant impact in the game, and I don't think they even need to do it with sacks. I think it can just be pressures, because I don't think I'm not a huge believer in Cade McNamara, and I think with JJ McCarthy it might just be more keep him in the pocket, see what happens. Like don't let him get loose. But with Cade McNamara in there, Cade McNamara has had a ton of passes batted down. You saw a lot of passes batted down last week from the Ohio State defensive line. Those are, Ryan Day in the press conference on Tuesday talked about the fact that can be as good as a sack. That can be a pass batted down. That can be as good as a sack, especially 3rd and 8. Cade McNamara drops back, tries to throw it. Boom, Zach Harrison gets his hand up, knocks it away. It's either an incomplete pass and it's 4th down, or you tip one up in the air, and as soon as that ball goes up in the air, everyone in their head goes, this is going to get intercepted. And eventually you do get one intercepted. Cade McNamara has hit offensive linemen in the back of the helmet 2 games in a row. Hit offensive linemen in the back of the helmet twice in a row. He is not exactly elevating the ball right now. That seems like that's going to be something to really keep an eye on. Tyreek Smith, Zach Harrison, or any of the other defensive ends or defensive tackles. Just get those hands up, do that Larry Johnson match the hands drill, and that just feels like there is going to be a big play, whether it's just a knockdown pass on 3rd down or a tip ball that ends up as an interception from one of those defensive ends at some point on Saturday.
Yeah, how many times have we seen the situation of where the quarterback gets chased and then he just throws this dying duck of a ball that just falls right into the arms of a waiting defensive back, or where there's just a situation of they just get hurried a little bit and they just kind of lose their mind and they arm punt it. So yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to be a case of where Ohio State records a bunch of sacks. Michigan's not giving up a lot of sacks. I think it's 8 on the year, but 7 have come in Big Ten play. I still think that there's an opportunity for Ohio State to kind of get to McNamara or McCarthy, depending on who's in there. And I think some of it really depends on the situation of what's going on at the running back position. Is it just going to be the pile mover Hassan Haskins? Are they going to bring in Blake Corum? Or are they going to really change stuff up with Donovan Edwards, who had a huge game in terms of the receiving game with 170 yards? This is the same head coach that sits there and had whatever that stupid long line of players situation going on, or he may try to run 4 tight ends out there. I mean, you just don't know. I mean, he's, a genius like I don't know. I can't even come up with a statement that works there because I'm not sure I could do it with a straight face.
Super chat from Diego D. Let's go Ohio. 50% playoff share. It would be if Ohio State and Cincinnati both make the field. We get a top 5 the game, and we get to destroy their souls. I love football. Hate week is here. This is a top 5 Ohio State-Michigan game now. Michigan was 5th in the college football playoff rankings, even if they were 6th in the coaches and AP polls. Let's be honest, only one of those actually matters right now, and it is the college football playoff rankings. I did the morning scoop show on Tuesday morning with Bill Bender of the Sporting News, talking about some of the 11 previous Ohio State-Michigan top 5 matchups. There were some pretty famous games in there. This is going to be right up there. Most recent one was 2016, of course. You probably remember that game. But the 2006 game, 1 versus 2, was obviously a famous one. 1973, that was the one where Ohio State tore down the Michigan banner, the M Club banner before the game. Game ended up in a 10-10 tie. Michigan quarterback Dennis Franklin broke his collarbone.
Great documentary, that tiebreaker on BTN. Yep. Really well done.
Yeah, and so the Big Ten presidents voted to send Ohio State to the Rose Bowl because that was the tiebreaker was basically head-to-head, and then record, and then overall record, and it was like everything was tied.
And the Big Ten was only sending one team to postseason. That was it. I mean, there wasn't. You weren't. Oh well, it was a good run. We'll just go to the Outback Bowl. I mean, that wasn't the situation. It was a different time, and that Michigan team did not get to taste the postseason because Ohio State just held it over them. And watch that documentary. I have it on DVR. I'm probably going to watch it again this week just for motivation, just for writing motivation.
And Ohio State went out and just annihilated USC. That was not a very good USC team, but Ohio State went out and just killed USC in the Rose Bowl that year. The Big Ten didn't start doing a second team in the bowls until 1975, I think was the first year that they did it, when the second Big Ten team went to the Orange Bowl. So that Ohio State went to the Rose Bowl in 75. I believe Michigan went to the Orange Bowl that year. And then the following year, I think Ohio State was the one that went to the Orange Bowl and played Colorado, and Michigan went to the Rose Bowl. So that was back when the Orange Bowl was a consolation prize. This year, the Orange Bowl is a college football playoff semifinal. Not too bad. Super chat from German Drummer. What about Michigan scares you the most? On the road, good defense makes me think this game could look like the Nebraska game. What are your thoughts?
I mean, the easy answer, as I punch up the next one, is I think the easy answer is going to be those defensive ends, because we see what happens when the adrenaline really starts kicking in for CJ Stroud. I mean, he gets the yips a little bit, and the ball can go a little high, the ball can go a little short. How is Ohio State going to be able to handle that pressure? Is it going to be a situation where they're going to be able to move the pocket? Is Stroud going to be comfortable enough to just step up a little bit? And the good news is Ohio State doesn't have to run a lot of deep routes. And we saw them run some deep stuff against Michigan State because it was there. But Ohio State's perfectly happy, if you're going to play off, to sit there and run little 8, 9, 10-yard pass plays that, and just march down the field. So it's not like CJ Stroud is going to need 8 seconds back there for Garrett Wilson to run a triple move and break free and everything else. But I'm going to take the easiest answer and say those defensive ends. I mean, Ohio State's been able to do just fine up at Michigan Stadium through the years. They were just a couple of inches away against Michigan in 2011. During the Fickle year, of an incomplete pass that could have, given Ohio State the win at that point. I don't think they're intimidated by playing in that venue, especially when our friends at TickPick sent us some numbers saying that 30-some% of the tickets are being sold to Ohio zip codes.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, that is generally, Ohio State is pretty well represented up there generally in a typical year. Certainly this year with Ohio State potentially playing for a national championship, Michigan, of course, also playing for a national championship. I do wonder, just within the Michigan fan base, I see there are some confident Michigan fans in our comments. I do wonder,
that's just King Bronco.
I do wonder in the Michigan fan base overall, what, give them some truth serum. Like, how are you really feeling right now? Because it feels like if Ohio State, gets the opening kickoff, goes out and scores, Michigan gets the ball and kicks a field goal or something like that, Ohio State goes right down the field and scores again. And it's 14-3 with 5 minutes left in the first quarter. It feels like you might have some, oh no, here we go again, just energy just sucked out of the stadium. the team's going to feel that. The team is probably going to be thinking that, and to some degree as well. They were, I think, the last team in the nation to trail a game this year. They have really not trailed much at all. They have not had to play from behind. I don't think they're really built to come from behind. It feels like I am anticipating this as an interesting game potentially into the fourth quarter. I don't think Ohio State's going to completely blow them off the field. But if Michigan falls behind early, it feels like that could snowball. Like there is a way that it's not going to turn into the Michigan State game, but there is a way that, the scenario I laid out, it's 14-3 Ohio State with 5 minutes left in the first quarter. Cade McNamara comes on the field and it's like, well, we have to score a touchdown on this drive or we're in real trouble. And then you start pressing and then you get a ball tipped in the air, you throw into coverage and one's going the other way. Like that's the kind of thing where I think deep down in every Michigan fan's heart, there is a recognition that that's at least a possibility. And I don't think that's a possibility for Ohio State this week, but it feels like there is a way this goes very poorly for Michigan.
Well, let's go back to the 18 game, the 62-39. It was 7-6 Michigan or 7-6 Ohio State opening moments of the second quarter. And then the lights went out for Michigan at that point. And yes, that game was at Ohio Stadium. It was a different venue, but it just, even that 18 team was able to just flip it on with a switch and it was on. Ohio State scored 7 in the first quarter, then 17-17, 21. This is, this team, what do you think it could be at the end of the first quarter? I mean, and also Michigan is still a team that prides itself on the run, and Cade McNamara is, he's much more of a 5-yard passer type of guy than an up top guy. And I did a show out of the region with a Michigan writer today, and he said, well, we haven't seen a lot of McNamara go deep because it hasn't really been asked of him. Well, it hasn't been asked of him, but if he could do it, don't you think it would have been asked of him by now? I just don't think that's his game. So if Michigan falls into a 2-score hole and running is not necessarily going to be there for the Wolverines, it could end up being, it could get away from them quickly.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the key for Michigan is just hang in there. Don't, the defense has to get stops. If the defense doesn't get stops, Michigan can't win a track meet against this Ohio State team, because Ohio State, if Ohio State's putting up 7s, this is going to be over fairly quickly. If they can hold Ohio State to some field goals, maybe you get a turnover, you give the offense a short field to work with. That's, I think, where Michigan has a chance to really make this a very competitive 4-quarter game. But yeah, it feels like, every time you watch Cade McNamara, Tony and I do the Michigan Monday show on Buckeye Weekly every week. So we watch every snap of every Michigan game, and to talk about it every week, it feels like week after week, even against not particularly good pass defenses, he takes like 3 shots downfield, and at least 2 of them are thrown in a spot where it's like, not within 5 yards of a receiver. There was, I think at the Northwestern game, he took a bunch of shots downfield, and it was like the pass he came closest to completing was one where the safety or the corner had gotten inside the Michigan receiver and was running the post route for him, and the receiver managed to break the pass up, but that was about the closest he came to completing one. Tony charts every week like how far downfield McNamara's throwing, and it's like on average he's throwing the ball like 3 yards downfield in the air, and then you hope your receivers can make a play. And they have Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards can make a play. AJ Henning potentially can make a play, but you're not. There's a lot of Eric All in this offense, and like Eric All can have 8 catches for 90 yards. And I don't know that that's a bad thing for Ohio State, because it's like, that's moving the chains, but it's not, that doesn't get you in the end zone. That just keeps the chains moving. Without Ronnie Bell, the loss of Ronnie Bell, I mean, it was in the first game of the season. It was a real bummer, because Ronnie Bell's a good player. Ronnie Bell, I think, would really change how I'm thinking about this game from Michigan's perspective. They haven't really replaced him. They've got Cornelius Johnson, and Mike Sainristil made a really nice play last week. Andrew Anthony made a really nice catch last week. But then you look at the box score, and it's like, yeah, Mike Sainristil's really nice catch was Mike Sainristil's only catch of the day. Andrew Anthony's catch was Andrew Anthony's only catch of the day.
And do they have a guy that can deliver it to them regularly? I mean, even if Ronnie Bell was there, I mean, is it going to be a situation? Would they be able to connect on that pass? I mean, yeah, sure, you can have a fantastic completion percentage when you're throwing 3 to 5 yards, and you look at the drive chart, and everything is inside of 2 lines, just there, and then above it is either X's or just nothing because they don't attempt it. So I don't know. It'll be interesting as we're starting to back up with super chats again.
All right. Well, I just want to address one thing. M. Goboski says Eric All is a huge mismatch for Ohio State. Okay. Eric All, this is a conversation that Tony and I had on a Buckeye Weekly show that's going to be released a little later this week. Eric All is on one hand. Okay. There's Eric All. This is potentially a good thing for Michigan. Who's a big mismatch from the Ohio State side, Kevin? I can think of 3 names in the passing game who might represent a huge mismatch for Ohio State on the passing game.
This guy named Chris Olave.
Yes. Yes. Chris, Garrett, and Jackson. Yes.
Yeah.
That seemed, and yes, Eric All is potentially a mismatch. Eric All is a mismatch. Is Eric All going to go 10 catches for 250 yards? I suspect that he is not. I would wager a good amount of money that Eric All is not, in fact, going to have 150 yards receiving. No. How confident are you that Jackson Smith and Jigba and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, none of them are going to have 150 yards receiving? Because I don't know that you could be that confident.
I think that Chris Olave, the Wolverine killer, is going to go out there. I don't get to play in your little prediction game, which is probably good because I don't want to have any skin in that game. But I'm going to say that Olave has a couple of touchdowns in here because he's just a Wolverine killer, and I think that part of his coming back. We heard in interviews today, part of his coming back was he wanted another crack at Michigan. And he's going to come out there and be motivated, and he's got the furthest to go to get to 1,000 yards this season. So he's certainly going to be running out there with his hand up, saying, "Hey, let me go do what I do." And we've seen it time and time again throughout his career that he saves his best for last against the Wolverines.
All right, super chat from Mike Farino. I just realized Georgia could make the playoff with 0 ranked wins if Arkansas and Clemson lose this weekend and they lose the SEC. That's so stupid. It is remarkable how you hear every year about the incredible SEC and how it's just such a murderer's row every week. And then you go through and Georgia is going to potentially, they hit Clemson, which is a 3 or 4 loss team already. UAB, South Carolina, which is actually a sneaky decent team this year. Vanderbilt, Arkansas, which is hanging on by its fingernails to a ranking, Auburn, who has fallen apart, Kentucky, who has fallen apart, Florida, who has fallen apart, Missouri, who never really got it together, Tennessee, Charleston Southern, and Georgia Tech, who just lost 55-0. I mean,
because the SEC is so good that they just knock each other out. I mean, everybody but 3 teams, I think I read the stat, is already bowl eligible. But, again, that's when you have a bunch of 6-win teams. That's kind of what happens. But I will say it's not Georgia's fault that Clemson was terrible. I mean, and I understand Clemson's in the playoff, is in the top 25 because 25 teams have to be in there. But, sure, they've turned around their season to a certain extent. People will look at the game against Wake Forest. Yeah, I mean, Wake was certainly ranked. Wake had taken it to a lot of teams, but Clemson was able to play better defense than anything Wake had seen this year, and Clemson found Wake's Achilles heel, defense, because Wake can't play a shred of defense.
Super chat from Jeff Hines. I'm having a good feeling about Saturday. OSU 45-21. I mean, that's a little more than I was going to pick as a margin of victory, but it's I think that's within the realm of possibility. That's a lot of the advanced analytics system have stuff in the 38 or 42 kind of range for Ohio State, and in somewhere in the 20s or low 30s for Michigan, whether it's 24 or even 31. But it's like a lot of stuff in those kind of ranges for the computer models that we look at. So that's not necessarily.
I was going to say that 45-21 score. That was a Sunday night score for me when I was kind of going through it. And I mean, what I should do is I should chart it one week. I mean, on a big game like this, and here's my Sunday score, here's my Monday score, because you'll kind of see where my mindset changes there. I mean, I'm not at 45-21 at the moment, but Sunday, I mean, I had a couple friends reach out to me. I'm like, oh, this smells like a 45-21 game, and I think on Monday, I was probably down around like 42-24. I mean, it's kind of adjusting. I generally write my scores on Wednesday and submit them internally, so that way, as I start doing shows throughout the week, I don't have 6 different scores out there. Oh, I was right. Well, how many scores did you have out there? It's like filling out 7 brackets. If you fill out 7 brackets, you're bound to sit there. You should get the national champion, I would hope.
Yeah, that's yeah. I will. I'm kind of on your timetable. We don't normally get asked to do predictions this early in the week. It being Michigan week, you start getting asked early in the week, so I may have a little variety through my week, but I will nail in a final answer by probably Wednesday this week. Roto CFP Nerds guys brought up the fact that OSU gave up less points to common opponents than Michigan. That's true. That is Ohio State. They had 6 common opponents with Michigan, right? 6. And Ohio State scored more than Michigan in 5 of the 6 games and gave up fewer points than Michigan in 5 of the 6 games against those common opponents. One thing that I think, you can look at that and say, well, if you look at their overall defensive numbers, Michigan is better than Ohio State. All those common opponents came later in the season. None of those games were the first 3 weeks of the season when Ohio State was not, Ohio State's defense the first 3 weeks of the season doesn't, it's still factored into all those like season long models. It's not the same defense that it was those first 3 weeks. And that's true in personnel, that is true in scheme, and it's true in coaching. It is all, everything is different.
Yeah.
So you can't really take the Minnesota game or the Oregon game or the Tulsa game and kind of directly apply them, because that's not the defense you're facing on Saturday if you're Michigan. I mean, there was a very famous tweet week 1, Thursday night, from a Michigan writer who said Minnesota is laying out a heck of a game plan to beat Ohio State. And I don't think that game plan works anymore, because that is not the defense you're playing 11 weeks later. So that's, that's something that I think is worth keeping in mind. And one reason, if you're going to look at the common opponents for the two teams, that may honestly be a little bit of a better measure of how things really are right now than some of the season-long models.
Randall Perkins, I think we handle in the big house. That Nebraska game helped these kids in a big away atmosphere. Everything this season has helped the Buckeyes team grow. Absolutely. I mean, they going to the big book of sports axioms. They're not freshmen by this point of the season. We can go through all of these things, but you have a CJ Stroud who had not started a collegiate game, who now has 10 starts under his belt because he didn't play in the Akron game, but he's got the 10 starts. He's a Heisman front runner. We haven't even really talked about Heisman. I mean, we have more shows to do, so I'm sure that'll come up later. But they're not cover 1, cover 3 almost exclusively. They're not, we're going to run single high come hell or high water. Well, it was hell. I mean, it was hell for a while by doing that. I mean, they're still, they still don't necessarily have a lot of depth at linebacker, but they seem to have found some guys that are getting things done. I mean, that depth still takes a little bit of hit depending on how healthy Cody Simon is, but Steele Chambers has really stepped into his role. There's a lot of different things at this point, but I'll go to the offensive side of the ball. It's a very different CJ Stroud than what we saw in the first 3 weeks of the season. I mean, again, things could change in this game if he gets sped up. You don't know what happens, but he's not coming out there completely just like on 20 cups of coffee, all freaking out all the time. He's much more calm. He's much more collective in what he does. So it's very different as I bring Tony back in. So I agree with what Randall said. Everything is building up to this. Tony?
Sorry, I was muted. You should have heard what I had to say. But I am back. I guess we should get rid of this, take care of the super chat from King Bronco.
Well, he has
Thank
that, and
you for
then he asks, then that's his question.
Thoughts on
I don't want to say
Mexico
anything if other people haven't watched. I just finished it
season
this
3.
weekend.
No, I'm still in the midst of season 2. And I don't really have favorite cartels. I'd have to go check my Topps cartel cards to figure out and go through and see which my favorite is. Tom, are you a Narcos person?
I am watching the original Narco series, the one from like 4 years ago. I'm in the middle of season. I think I finished season 2, episode 8 or 9 or so. I did see. I got to the famous Pablo sitting, looking sad on the swing shot. And I was watching that meme, and I turned into the Leo, what's his name, watching TV and point. Hey, there it is. Yeah, that was me watching. Hey, so that was very exciting. That was pretty recent. But no, I just spend all my free time podcasting and coaching youth sports, so I don't have a lot of time to watch TV. So
I like Juarez. I really like Juarez in season 3. So there you go.
Right.
But
Good
go
enough,
ahead.
Good enough.
We have a super chat. I'll leave that up there so we have it. But go ahead and you just got off the call with Gary Barta, so that's we'll get we got plenty of time to talk about Michigan's running game, everything else. But let's get to kind of the news of the moment.
Yeah. Basically, one of the first questions was why Alabama and Ohio State switched. And actually, Gary Barta didn't even have to get to the question. He just said Ohio State's win was like very impressive. Obviously, 49-0 at the half, 3 receivers over 100 yards. CJ Stroud looking really, really good again compared to Alabama's relatively close win, quote unquote, relatively close win. So that was what precipitated that switch. And actually, his quote was following its incredible performance against a good Michigan State team. That's why they moved Ohio State to number 2. Credited the defense as well with what they did against Kenneth Walker, even though he admitted there's only so much running the ball you can do when you're down 49-0. So that did play a part, but still, at that point, the Ohio State defense was impressive as well, which is something they've wanted to see more from Ohio State. And so when they're comparing Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, they say, Ohio State has the best offense of the group. Georgia has the best defense. Alabama has a good mix of both. And they even tried to consider Cincinnati in that group, but they also considered Cincinnati with the group behind them of Oklahoma State, or mainly Notre Dame and Michigan, because it sounds like Oklahoma State is still maybe on the cusp of they're a little bit too tied in with the Big 12 right now, and it feels like the committee is just waiting for the Big 12 to separate itself right now, because they even said there's not been that much discussion about the separation at 10, 9, 8, 7, even including Oregon in there. But it's like, it's like when you're moving into a new place, put those boxes over in the corner. We'll deal with them once we get the washer and the dryer and the couch and the buffet in and all of this stuff. And then eventually you'll go like, all right, let's start unpacking the Big 12. All right, where are we going to put Oklahoma State? Where are we going to put Baylor? Because right now they don't need them, but they probably will here shortly. So that was a few of the major things. And again, this pretty much went, I don't want to say as planned, but very logical. So there weren't a lot of upset people on the call, which is pretty disappointing.
I hear there was a 45-second question about Clemson.
There was a question about Clemson. Basically, the question was, did Clemson's close, tough losses help them get ranked along with their win over Wake Forest? And Barta said they definitely talked about Clemson playing Georgia really tough, that 10-3 win to start the season. And their other losses have been to Pitt and NC State. Both of those are ranked teams. The win over Wake Forest has been their signature win. And congratulations to Wake Forest on their spectacular season this year. But when that is your signature win, I don't – that's not much of a signature. But they did say they've been watching Clemson all year long, and they've been impressed with the defense. Didn't say much about the offense. There is not much to say, as you might be unsurprised to hear.
Yeah, you get on the call and there's not a lot of conflict. That's like watching Jerry Springer and everybody just, hugging it out. I mean, that's not what I watch it for. I mean, I want to watch it for the brawls. I want to watch Maury for the paternity test. I want to get on that call and just be like, why didn't UTSA do? I mean, dude, relax. I mean, but that's what the fun of the call is.
I don't know if I've ever heard an Alabama reporter on the call. I think they just stay home and thinking it's all going to work out. There's no reason to call. It's going to be just fine. And you know what? I don't know if it's going to be just fine, unless, of course, they win the SEC championship. Do we want to? Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, there have been a couple questions about the likelihood of Auburn beating Alabama this weekend. As Gary Lewis says, the vibe around Auburn college football is not great right now. Brian Harsin is not necessarily doing great. Brian Harsin is also potentially running into a Nick Rolovich situation with a new vaccination mandate for state employees that could cause an issue for him there. And Bo Nix is out for the year. So,
But that could be addition by subtraction.
Well, but Bo Nix is either worth plus 14 points or minus 14 points, depending on the day. He's kind of the remember Bo Wallace, Ole Miss quarterback. He's got
Bad Bo and good Bo. Yes.
Yes, he's got a little Bo Wallace in him. Little. If you want your kid to be a wide variance SEC quarterback, consider naming him Bo. But yeah, I don't expect that to be a game where Alabama has a ton of trouble. But those trips to Jordan-Hare can be tough for them. They have not won with any great consistency there. Auburn's gotten them a couple times recently, in times when you didn't necessarily expect it. I'm not expecting it this week, though.
Now, TJ Finley has been starting. He started the last game for them. He was LSU's starter last year for about 5 games. He has started against Alabama before, and last year's 55-17 near win at home in Baton Rouge, where he threw for 144 yards, completing 50% of his passes. But more recently, obviously, starting at South Carolina in the 21-17 loss, he completed 17 of 32 passes for 188 yards with a touchdown, Tom. So watch yourself. The War Eagle is going to get it done. And when I say get it done, they're going to play. That's about all you can hope for.
They'll play 60 minutes. That's there's going to be a heck of a lot of offense and a heck of a lot of defense, but the team that puts up the most points is going to definitely win the game.
As I like to say when I'm still weighing my options as to who to pick in an Auburn game, it's an ongoing investigation.
Do we want to get to the super chat from Doug Tipton?
Absolutely.
Let's do that.
Do you think we can stop Michigan's running game? Since you guys have been talking, I'll go ahead and say yes. I do think Ohio State can stop Michigan's running game. I don't know what to think about Blake Corum, whether he's going to play or not. I know at one point it sounded like he was out for the season. He dressed last week, but that could have just been make believe. That just give Ohio State something to think about. And so I don't know what to think there yet. And if he's not 100%, I don't know how effective he's going to be anyway. And he's gotten less and less effective as the season went on, even while he was healthy. He started out hot, just as Hassan Haskins did, but they've both come back to earth a bit, even with Hassan Haskins rushing for 140 and 150 yards a couple of games ago for a couple of games, but he's doing it with 30 carries. And this past week, he was at 20 for 78. So I don't think it's that difficult to stop. It is not difficult for a good defense to stop Michigan's running game. Does Ohio State have a good defense? I think they have a good enough defense to where I'm not seeing 160 yards. I think 160 yards would be pretty good for Michigan in this game, I think that might be a little bit high because if I'm saying 160 yards would be pretty good, then I shouldn't think that they get there if Ohio State's going to stop them. But I think they'll be held under their average. I'll just say that.
Well, the interesting thing about the Ohio State defense is you people want to slag them for how they played, especially early in the year, but they've been pretty consistently good against the run this year. They've held opponents to 82, I think, % of their season rushing averages. I think that was that's a yard per carry based metric from College Football Nerds. 90% is like average because you're going to play some crappy teams. You're going to play your Akrons or whoever. So you're going to handle those teams almost regardless. But Ohio State's run defense is substantially better than their pass defense. Michigan is the opposite. Michigan's pass defense is substantially better than their run defense. So, I don't think Michigan's going to be able to run the ball that effectively against Ohio State. I mean, Hassan Haskins is, let's assume Blake Corum's out or compromised enough. They used Donovan Edwards last week, but they used Donovan Edwards in the passing game. They've really not used Donovan Edwards a whole lot in the running game. So you figure they're going to be riding Hassan Haskins 27, 31, 20 carries the last 3 weeks. He's had big games against Indiana, 6.2 yards per carry. Pretty big game against Penn State, 5 yards a carry on 31 carries. 5.9 yards per carry against Nebraska, and was great at the beginning of the season. But Rutgers, 12 carries, 41 yards, 3.4. Wisconsin, 19 carries, 47 yards, 2.5 yards per carry. Michigan State, 14 carries, 59 yards, 4.2 yards a carry. Maryland, 20 carries, 78 yards, 3.9 yards per carry. Any of those is not going to get it done. And Ohio State, I think, is, they're not quite Wisconsin level defense, but they're better than Maryland level defense, right? I mean, that is not going to get it done, because I don't think they're going to be able to they're going to be able to move the ball consistently enough through the air. They're going to have to be able to run and stay on schedule, and I don't know if they can run well enough to stay on schedule.
Tony brought up the number 160, and I've got the numbers from the last 10 games, and a lot of this I'm trying to hold back for tail of the tape, but it's funny you mentioned 160 as being the number, and they've run for more than 160 yards in 3 of the last 10 games. In the last 8 games, they've only done it once, and that was in 2018, where they ran for 161 yards. But they ran for 91 the last time they played. 161, 100, 91, 57, 122. I'm sorry, they did it twice. There's 152 was in 13, but when you go back and you look at some of their leading rushers, people that have gone for more than 100 yards, there have only been 3 times where somebody went for over 100 yards, and that guy was Denard Robinson. And Denard Robinson isn't running through that door for them right now. And again, one other point, I know Tony's got something to say. People are really enamored with Michigan's running game, but let's not forget, Michigan, the first 3 games of the season, went for 334, 343, 373. It's been nowhere close to that since then. So congratulations. You are the non-conference September running champion for what you did against Western, Washington, and Northern Illinois. But since then, they've had 2 games where they've gone over 200. That was 204 against Nebraska and 294 against Northwestern. And anybody could run for about 200 on Northwestern this year. And in the last 4 games, they've not rushed for more than 190. And in those last 4 games, they have a grand total of 2 touchdowns on the ground.
Yeah, I see it's more likely Michigan rushes for 90 than 190, I think, in this game. And when you look at everybody wants to say Michigan's defense is better, just yards per carry, Ohio State's defense is better. They're like 11th in the nation. Michigan's is in the 30s. If you just go yards per carry in conference games, Ohio State is number 5 in the nation, 2.75 yards per carry allowed. Georgia's 2.55. Like, they're not that far from Georgia in conference games. Michigan is allowing in conference games 3.76 yards per carry, and that's factoring in sacks and all of that stuff as well. So, again, I think Ohio State's going to be able to outrun them. It's Tom, who is more likely to rush for 160 yards in this game, do you think?
In terms of just raw rushing total, I think Ohio State. I think Ohio State's likely to dominate the yards per carry, which is one of my favorite stats about this series. Is going back to 2002, the team that rushes for a higher yards per carry in the game has won every single game. And yards per carry is not something that, total yardage is like, well, of course, the team that runs the ball more, if you have a lead, you're going to run the ball more. So, of course, that can be biased by, just sort of game state. This is purely who is winning at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And whoever has won at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball every year since 2002 has won the Ohio State-Michigan game. And I'm just going to read you Ohio State's margin in the running game, okay? Margin. So 2013, 4.2. They rushed for 8.5 yards per carry to 4.3 for Michigan, 4.2. 2.8 in 2014, 4.5 in 2015, 2.0 in 2016, 1.9 in 2017, 0.8 in 2018, 1.8 in 2019. If you are losing, if you're getting outrushed by more than a yard and a half per carry on the ground, you are going to lose. And that is especially, I mean, Michigan in 2013 was, that was not exactly the same game as they're going to be playing on Saturday. And that was also one where Ohio State turned the ball over. Ohio State was in control of that game and then turned the ball over a couple times, and Michigan got back into it with a lot of throwing. That was a real outlier. I don't think the Denard Robinson or the Devin Gardner game plan is going to work for Michigan on Saturday, because Devin Gardner is not walking through that door, let alone Denard Robinson. So if Ohio State wins, if Ohio State controls the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and I think they have a possibility to do that, and they're able to run the ball better than Michigan, as has held true every year since 2002, the team that does that is going to win. I think Ohio State has a pretty good chance of doing that on Saturday.
Ohio State leads the nation in yards per carry right now, 5.82 yards per carry. Michigan is considerably lower. Obviously, Ohio State drops down when you just look at conference games to ninth overall at 5.57 yards per carry, but you've got to go all the way down to number 70 in the nation to find Michigan at 4.14 yards per carry. So you've got Ohio State almost averaging a yard and a half more than Michigan. Now, what does that mean for this game? It may mean a lot. It may not mean anything, but Ohio State's running game is better. Ohio State's run defense is better. You would think that when they meet, having played so many similar opponents, Michigan's run game has, as I said, it started out great, as Kevin said. It's not a scary thing. They have a hard runner in Hassan Haskins, but he's not necessarily going to make guys just keep missing. He's not Kenneth Walker.
He's a
not
pile
Travion
mover.
Henderson.
He's a pile mover. He's got that leg drive. He can sit there and turn a 4-yard carry into an 8-yard carry, but he's not going to be that guy that's going to sit there and get to the outside and just continually punish you by picking off 18, 20, 25-yard chunks. I mean, he's somebody, though, that you have got to get down to the ground.
He's a more agile Master Teague in that he's not jump cutting or anything. He's not outstanding in anything, but you give him 25 carries, he's going to get you like 125 yards, maybe more, and can get you the 3 yards that you need or the 1 yard that you need, except for when the Michigan offensive line is a little bit lacking. And sometimes they can be, especially this year, where short yardage is not what they do well. And I've got I had Hassan Haskins runs charted from this last game, and half of his carries go for more than half of his carries go for less than 3 yards. So you give him the ball, and it's more likely that he's going to pick up 2 than 5, or pick up 2 than 8. And that's you don't stay on schedule like that. And so that's going to be, now you're relying on, do you run it again? And now it's 3rd and 6, and now Cade McNamara throwing 6 yards downfield, not his specialty.
I have I'm going to go back to a super check, because I don't know if we answered it, but go ahead. I'm just we didn't ever got to Jeff Hines' super chat.
Go ahead.
Just admit it, y'all think this is going to be a blowout. I told you where I was on Sunday. I told you I was at 45-21 on Sunday, but it moves. It moves. Sorry, Seinfeld. I don't know what my score is going to be. As I said, I'll write it tomorrow, but I'm certainly leaning toward Ohio State covering. I don't know if I'm going to see the pissed off Ryan Day. We're going to hang 100 on him, but I could see Ohio State winning this by 3 scores.
Yeah, Kevin, you posted in the Ask the Insiders board, you posted a poll for where did people think the score was going to be. And I don't want to say which one I went and tip my hand, but this morning, yesterday, I was feeling like, do I need to be out in front of the blowout possibility? That way, when it happens, I'd be like, well, this is what I saw. This is what I thought would happen. And pat myself on the back, because you guys won't do it for me. You won't give me any credit. And so I'm like, you know what? Do you do you go conservative or do you go with what you think should happen? And I'm still working that out because I do feel very confident about Ohio State. But then, I watched the offensive drives against Penn State and Nebraska again today, so that I could bring myself back down and what exactly were other teams doing, because that was one of the questions. Maybe I forgot to put it in one of our Michigan listener questions, or somebody asked me what were those two teams doing, and really a lot of that was what Ohio State was doing with penalties and just killing themselves on drives and missing blocks that they normally make and leaving defensive ends and the hanging linebacker to come in and stuff the running game with that things that have seemed to have been cleaned up some. So um, I'm feeling pretty good, but it is only Tuesday. We'll see how things go. Would I don't think any of us would be shocked to see a blowout, but is 21 points a blowout? I think so.
Yeah, I mean, if you go through the series, the history of the series, 21 points, it would be like a huge outlier. That doesn't happen very often. Blowouts used to be 31-3, 28-0. Then you got into the Rich Rod era, and all of a sudden, then you're losing 42-7, and the blowouts get a little bigger. But yeah, I mean, again, I've said I think there is absolutely a path to Ohio State blowing out Michigan if Ohio State scores quick. Michigan doesn't answer with a touchdown, even if they, whether they go 3 and out or whether they kick a field goal. If they're down 14-3 late in the first quarter and Cade McNamara's got the ball and, the crowd is dead and everyone's going, oh, crap, here we go again, that is going to be the biggest possession of Cade McNamara's life. And I don't think they're going to be able to run it. So I think you're going to have to make a play, and I think you're going to have to make a play more than 6 yards downfield. And how is that going to go? I mean, it seems like there is a non-zero chance that goes poorly. And if that goes poorly, then it's 17-3, 21-3. And then, Katie bar the door at that point. And I'm not saying I think that's what's going to happen. I'm saying there is a scenario where that happens. I don't think there is a comparable scenario the other direction. I mean, the last time Michigan had a lead like that against Ohio State was 2003? They were up 21-0 on Ohio State in 2003, I think. But I mean, I don't think there's a way that Ohio State falls apart that badly. I can see Michigan falling apart that badly. That's not what I'm going to pick because I don't think that's the most likely outcome. I think the most likely outcome is somewhere in that 31-45 range for Ohio State and mid-ish 20s for Michigan, mid to high 20s for Michigan, something in there. So is that a blowout? I don't know. I mean, you're potentially talking about a 3-score game at that point, which is, compared to what Ohio State did to Michigan State last week, no, that's not a blowout. Compared to what would normally be considered a result against a top 5 team, like, yes, that is a blowout in that case.
Before we get to the super chat, I'm not going to go into all the numbers, but I got the poll in front of me. We have 770 votes so far. So if you are a member of Buckeye Scoop, be sure to get on and vote on that. 340 people are saying 14 to 20 points will be Ohio State's winning margin. 166 people are saying 21 to 27 points, and 45 brave souls are saying 45 or 28 or more points. So right there at that point, you've got 63, 69. Nice. 69% are saying that it's going to be somewhere from 14 up, and then you've got 27% who are saying it's going to be at least 21 or more.
And is it still 2 people picking Michigan at this point? Are there more now?
No, it's a total of 21. 16 people are picking Michigan win by 6 or fewer, 3 by 7 to 13, and there are 2 very naughty souls out there saying Michigan will win by 14 or more.
Well, all right then. All right. You know what? If that happens, congratulations to them. I'm sure they'll tell us about it once it happens. So let's get to the super chat from Treasure of the Torah. Thank you very much for the super chat. I can't guess the score, but I think CJ Stroud has a great game, honestly. And I keep coming back to how calm and confident and under control is CJ Stroud at the start of this game. We've seen issues at the start of the Penn State game. He's a little hyped up, a little erratic. Oregon, obviously. Minnesota, obviously. Do those 2 games still count. I think a little in terms of nerves, and let's see him play from the outset in a very big game on the road where things are on the line, like every play matters. And I'm still waiting. Like he was fantastic, obviously, last week. It's comfortable. That's at home. This is going to be a little uncomfortable, I think, and the crowd is going to be into it. I just want to see that. I want to see C.J. Stroud from last week in a big game and perform this week, and then I'll know more and I'll feel better about him. Not that I don't feel good now. It's just uh, we've seen more of the shakiness, the early stuff in big games like this than what we saw from Michigan State, and so uh, I think he's. I mean, if I go 325 yards passing, Kevin, you taking the over or the under on that?
Well, I will say this from my handy dandy spreadsheet. Over the last 10 years, the highest passing yardage total any quarterback had was Dwayne Haskins going 19 of 30 for 318 and 5 touchdowns. Ohio State has only had 2 quarterbacks go for more than 300 yards over the last 10 games against Michigan, with Justin Fields going 14 to 25 for 302 with 4 touchdowns and no picks. So if he goes 325, he's going to insert himself at the top of that list. Granted, Justin Fields had access to JSN, Olave, and Wilson, but maybe, certainly JSN was still a first-year player at the point, was kind of rounding into shape. Well, actually, he wouldn't have been there. I always keep forgetting that they kind of bailed on 20, but he certainly had some weapons around him. I think 325 is fair, though. I really think 325 is fair, even with the situation. Boy, have we come a long way from JT Barrett, 9 of 15 for $113. Braxton Miller, 6 of 15 for $133. Even T. Peasy had a big game, 18 to 27 for 220 back in 2010.
Well, Troy Smith went for 300 in 2004 or 5 with some running. Haskins went 396 in 2018. I think that's going to be more than what we're looking at. But I don't know, Tom. I think 325 almost feels a little low compared to what we've come to expect at this point from C.J. Stroud.
Compared to what we've come to expect from CJ Stroud, yes. I do think that kind of the mystery variable here is how much are they going to want to run it, and can they run it with TreVeyon Henderson? Because I mean, we recorded a bonus show for later in the week earlier today. Tony and I did, and I sort of just pulled out of the thin air over-unders on rushing and passing for Ohio State. And I said, which would you be more surprised at, 175 rushing yards going over that, or 350 passing yards? Now, I had not gone back and looked at the historical numbers, and 350, obviously would be a huge historical outlier, but also this season has kind of been a huge historical outlier. So, it feels like if they run for 175 yards, they're going to win the game. Like if Ohio State can run the ball that well, either you're running the ball very consistently and staying on schedule, or you're hitting some real big plays in the ground game, which probably forces Michigan to move guys up, which opens stuff up back deep, and just keeps a lot of things. Keeps everything in the playbook basically at that point. So, to the question about Stroud, I'm going to be interested in 2 things at the beginning of the game. Number one, how does he look before, the game? First pass of the game, is he coming out jittery and airmailing the ball? And then 2, if Michigan does get to him once or twice early in the game, is he keeping those eyes downfield? Is he starting to get antsy in the pocket? Because he has really had clean pockets all fall for the most part. I mean, he got sacked twice against Michigan State, but I mean, like outside of those 2, he really wasn't pressured much. He wasn't pressured much against Penn State. He wasn't pressured much against Nebraska outside of the kind of disastrous play at the very end. I mean, he has really had time and room to throw all season. If Michigan does get pressure on him, and I think that's got to be their game plan, is bring pressure and try and rattle him. If they do get pressure on him, how does he respond to that?
Treasure the Torah, big facts. Henderson definitely has to show up for this game. Kevin, I am of the opinion that TreVeyon Henderson has kind of been building towards this. Ryan Day has been talking to him about toughness. Tony Alford been talking to him about toughness. We've seen him almost seek contact rather than hit the home runs that he's been known for, because I think he's wanting to show that toughness. I am expecting that toughness to be on display in this game. And we know Michigan may be going with the nickel defense. And if they do, that seems to play into maybe Travion Henderson being able to show more of that toughness. Now, it may limit the home run hitting because you're going to have faster defense out there. But I think he's just a freshman, but I am expecting him to be ready for this game, to show out for it, and really to just showcase the toughness, showcase a lot of his ability. And Tom, already one of my bold predictions, there's going to be a wheel route involving Travion Henderson in this game. So that's a teaser for y'all. Just be expecting that one.
I expect to have to adjudicate, was that really a wheel route or was that some sort of arrow, whatever? I'm already ready for that one to come at me. And, you know.
A wheel, oh wow, there's going to be a wheel route to a running back. Wow, Tony, so extremely bold. Are they going to hand the ball off to a running back too? I mean, so bold. One thing that I think does maybe play into the idea that Ohio State was going to try and come out and run the ball a lot is, what better way to neutralize Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo than having DeJuan Jones land on them about 15 times throughout the course of the game? I mean, at some point, that's going to slow the pass rush too. And you know, if you're running the ball and you're staying on schedule, you don't need Travion Henderson to bust a bunch of 60-yard runs. You need Travion Henderson to have a bunch of 6-yard runs. If Travion Henderson has a bunch of 6-yard runs and you're able to kind of grind on that Michigan front, that's going to pay off later in the game. The more I think about it this week, the more I think that might be the game plan for Ohio State is, if they can run the ball, just grind on them, because every year we do these tail of the tape shows, and every year we give all these position groups to Ohio State because Michigan has top-level talent that is, you know, commensurate with Ohio State in some spots on the field. Aiden Hutchinson, David Ajabo, those are guys who would fit right in that Ohio State defensive end room. And then you get to the German dude pretty quick. Like you get down that depth chart, and it's just like you've got the guys up here, and then you're down like there pretty quick. You wear those two guys out. You grind on those guys. You lean on those guys for a couple quarters. That's when Ohio State always seems to bust a long run in the fourth quarter against Michigan. Have you noticed that? I think there might be something to what I just said. That's the answer to why that always happens.
Out of the last 10 games against Michigan, I think you can see where my notes are here. How many times has Ohio State's leading rusher gone for at least 100 yards out of 10?
I would think at least 8. I'm trying to think of one. So the last 10 years?
The last 10 games, going back to 2010.
Boom Herron had like the 190-yard game, if that was 2010 or 2009.
175 in that game.
Yeah, and then Braxton, did Braxton go over in 2011?
Braxton had 100 in the 2011 loss.
And Hyde went crazy in 2012.
I was going to say Hyde had 146 in 12, but 226 in 13.
Yeah, and Miller went over 100 in that 13 game too. Ezekiel Elliott
Zeke had a couple, yeah.
Zeke had 17,000.
He had 121 in the one game and 214 in the other game. This again, in my list I've only put leading rusher for each.
Did Weber fall short in 2016?
They might not have done it in 16.
16.
Like 105 or 95.
Barrett went 30 for 125.
Okay, there you go. We should have known that.
30 carries for JT Barrett.
Dobbins did not do it in 2017.
Dobbins did do it in 2017. 101, 15 for 101.
Barely.
18.
Come on,
No, they didn't run the ball against anyone in 18.
But I think Dobbins did enough in 2018.
Dobbins wasn't your leading rusher. It was Mike Weber.
Weber had the 25-yard at the end.
That's your only one. 13 for 96, because then the following year Dobbins went 31 for 211 and 4.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
9 out of the last 10 games against Michigan, Ohio State has had a 100-yard rusher. Just on the other side, Michigan, as I said, had Denard Robinson for 3 straight years, and then the high water mark at that point was Hassan Haskins going for 78 on 12 carries last time they played.
No Fitzgerald Toussaint at all in there? No.
Toussaint had 120 but there in 11, but Robinson had 170. I actually did notate it off to the side.
That's a lot of running against that 2011 Ohio State vaunted defense.
Mm-hmm.
Whew. How are we doing on time? I see we still got a bunch of people that
We're
do
at an hour 40. We're at 4:23 on the line. My wife just got home, but she knows that I do a Tuesday show, so I got a couple more minutes before I have to go. And
Speaking of wives, I had one from John Foster that I wanted to address. Hey, Tom, saw your tweet the other day. So which Hallmark Christmas movie is your favorite? Because I tweeted about this the other day because my wife was going through Netflix and trying to find, whatever Christmas movie she wanted to watch. And I was just looking at them, and the plots of them were just magical. So my favorite one is the one where the high-powered executive from the big city has to go back to his or her small hometown, possibly trapped there due to being snowed in. Finds that the small town life that they found so repellent in theory is in fact far more appealing. And hey, there's some person from a far lower station in life, not an executive, no, perhaps a diner waitress, perhaps
runs the cupcake shop.
Yeah, cupcake shop is definitely a possibility, definitely in play. There's something about them, though. There is something. Yes, a lower station in life, but there is something about them, and I don't want to spoil the ending. I don't want to spoil the ending because it is just. It's pretty great. It's pretty great. So that's my favorite. I forget the title, but I'm sure just Google that, and I'm sure just only one movie's.
I heard it was called Every Christmas Movie, but I'm not sure about it. But I think it is just and it's always a cast of actresses on the way down of their career. They're starting to decelerate, end up in these shows. So I'm expecting to see the Capital One girl here in there pretty soon. Granville's finest. What's her name? Alias girl. Jen Garner.
Jennifer Garner.
I had to think about. She's already so far down on her career, in my point. Unless she's making bank from Capital One, I don't know.
Oh, she is. Yeah, she's from Greenville. Really?
Well, she went to Denison University, as did Steve Carell, as did Michael Eisner, as did Woody Hayes. Lots of famous Granvillians. Jennifer Garner was the graduation speaker a few years ago and came back and was taking pictures with people on the street in lovely downtown Granville just a few years ago.
Was she in front of Three Tigers?
Yes, I see somewhere around there. And Bruce Willis filmed a movie here with Hayden Christensen a few years ago. It's basically Hollywood East.
Look, Bruce Willis has filmed a movie in every single Ohio city that there is, so don't feel special about that. Look, I'm looking out right now. Yep, there's Bruce Willis. He's filming a movie.
Wake me when Nick Cage comes to town. Wake me when Nick Cage comes to town.
Very much so. Nerd boyfriend gets dumped is my favorite part. See, I mean,
no
there's
spoilers,
just so
much. Buck. Come on.
Yeah. All right. Your Christmas movies are all a sham, Tom. I don't want to.
There's only one Christmas movie. Die Hard.
Die Hard. Speaking of Bruce Willis. Jay Burke, you'll still have a top 25 defense after you lose to the Buckeyes, probably. Talking about Michigan. I don't know. It's hard to move a defense too far down after just one game, but if any offense can do it, it's the Ohio State offense. Well, shoot, Al Bundy says that Die Hard is the best Christmas movie. Al Bundy would know. I mean, anything else? I'm scrolling through here that we've got.
I mean, so much stuff happens in this chat as we get off onto things. I'm sure I've missed 1,000 great questions. Good thing that we've only got 20 more shows to do this week.
Yes, this from Dave Rice. Tony, what is your favorite ketchup-related Michigan Week tradition? Oh gosh, there are so many. Just one.
Filling Mirror Lake with ketchup and diving in.
No, I think it's going ketchup caroling and singing songs about ketchup to the neighbors, and then that's probably it. And then also the the popcorn strings filled with ketchup in various scarlet and gray, maize and blue colors, stuff like that, stuff that everybody does.
And the night
Can we
before, when
please?
you put on your ketchup and gray footy pajamas.
I'm looking for actual football questions here, and I'm struggling as we scroll through this.
That's what
Mgo
happens after
Boski
about
says
an hour 45.
Mgo Boski says Michigan literally has 2 top 15 NFL picks on the edge, which is absolutely. How many tackle combinations have they played as good as Ohio State's? Because I would submit the answer is 0.
Well,
If Michigan put up 8 sacks a game, I mean, if Michigan were sitting on 88 sacks right now, yeah, I mean, it would be even much more terrifying at that point because there would be a consistency there. But, I don't have necessarily all of my sack numbers in front of me in my other spreadsheet, but I mean, they're fantastic. They are the best defensive end combo that I've seen in football this year. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from that, but have they had a game where they've gone out and had 6 sacks apiece? Or really led to that type of havoc? Because Michigan hasn't necessarily just disrupted teams to that extent.
Well, and I keep going back to, for one, they did not. Neither of them had a sack against Maryland, but the Michigan defense had 7 sacks against Penn State, and were losing, and nearly lost, and should have lost that game. So that tells me if you sack C.J. Stroud 7 times, they're still gonna. I don't know that that's enough to actually beat Ohio State, which should be a terrifying thing for Michigan when they're going to be facing a defense very similar in ability to stop you as Penn State. So go ahead. I mean, you better convert half of those sacks into turnovers and eliminate the ability for Ohio State to continue to move the ball. And so, do all 7 of those sacks end drives? Do some of them come on the same drive? They better all end a drive if you're really wanting to. Penn State scored 17, getting sacked 7 times, lost 21-17. Michigan needed a 52-yard, 48-yard touchdown in the final moments to win that game after sacking the quarterback so many times. So, yes, we've talked about how important it is to stop those guys, and yet even if they don't, they almost lost to Penn State.
Not to completely derail us, but I have to share this exchange from the comments. Al Bundy says, Michigan about to get these hands. Hardy Jen says, hand, Al. The other will be comfortably tucked in your pants. That's it for me. Good night, everybody.
That's very true. Yes. If you're going to be using character names, you have to stay in character and don't get called out by other people as to how your character should be acting. I think we all know that. Anything else before we go? I think are we set? Are we good?
Yeah.
Kevin, anything else?
I think we're pretty good. I mean, we haven't set a time yet, but we'll be back on Friday for some leftovers to talk a little bit more. Whether or not it's an afternoon show or an evening show. I mean, to our gang of regulars, be sure to let us know in the comments when you would like to see it, and if we can make it work on our schedules, that would we're here to entertain you, so kind of let us know. But we haven't kind of figured that one out. I'll be recording a Big Me podcast coming up that I'll run on Friday with Michael Spath, who's covered the Wolverines for years and years, to get his take on what's happening there. And Tail the Tape will be coming out. I'll probably hold that till Friday just so it doesn't slip past everybody on Turkey Day.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then D Brown, it's not just about sacks, hits and pressures count too. Plus, our guys have a knack for stripping quarterbacks. Absolutely. Like if none of those sacks end in a forced fumble, I think Ohio State would take that. Not that they're looking for 7 sacks, but if they get to punt after each sack, however many there are, that would obviously be better than the alternative. And pressure, and that's where I get into it with. If you get after C.J. Stroud early, does he start hearing things? Does he start seeing things that aren't there? Where does he begin to calm down? And does he? So, yeah, hit him early, hit him often, even if it has to be after the whistle, I think, at one point, just to try and rattle him. I mean, we've seen Michigan do that years ago, decades ago, where you get a couple of shots in and try to assert your dominance, and then Ohio State would roll over it and on their back and expose their belly. I'm not saying that's going to happen this time, though, but that will go ahead and do it. I want to thank you all for watching, Thank you for comments. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for, I assume, being civil in the chat room there. We always do appreciate you guys stopping by and tuning in. So thank you all for doing that. And we'll see you live sometime on Friday. And we'll talk to everybody else on podcasts and YouTube shows whenever we do. Thanks again, and talk to you later.